Movies tend to depict Roman warfare as a grand spectacle full of loud cheers and glorious moments. In reality, it was nothing like that. The truth? No crowds, no shouts, just silence, exhaustion, and orders. The real action didn't begin with a charge. It began the day before. On the eve of battle, Roman soldiers did one of the least glamorous jobs in the ancient world. They dug. Thousands of men, armed with nothing but shovels, transformed into a construction crew, building fortifications around their camp. And these weren't just any trenches. Roman engineers demanded they be deep enough to stop charging cavalry and wide enough to keep enemy infantry at bay. Behind these trenches, soldiers built dirt walls, often topped with sharpened wooden stakes, turning every camp into a miniature fortress. Every stop, no matter how temporary, was treated like they were expecting unwanted visitors with bad intentions. The digging was backbreaking work, but it saved countless lives when enemies attacked at dawn. Once the camp was secure, the soldiers moved on to the next task: equipment inspection. Centurions checked every piece of armor and weapon, just like strict teachers inspecting homework. Any flaws, whether cracked helmet straps or dull swords, would result in punishment. Roman quality control was intense, making today's safety regulations look laid back. Next came food preparation. Soldiers would grind wheat into flour, mix it with dried meat, and prepare their daily rations. This usually included pasca, a nasty wine mixed with vinegar. Tasted terrible, but it kept them going. Complaining about food wasn't a thing back then. After that, officers arranged the legion into three main lines: the hastati in front, the principes in the middle, and the veteran triarii at the back. Every soldier knew where to stand and what to do. Roman military strategy wasn't about improvisation. It was about precision. If you stood in the wrong spot, it could cost you your life. As daylight faded, soldiers spent time maintaining their weapons. They sharpened their swords, adjusted armor straps, and reinforced shields. By night, they slept on hard ground, using shields as pillows and cloaks as blankets. While they rested, soldiers engaged in religious rituals, praying to gods for protection. The atmosphere was serious. No celebrations, just orders and preparations for the upcoming battle. At dawn, horns sounded. Thousands of soldiers, all lined up in their designated spots, prepared to move out. Their bronze helmets offered protection, but they also created blind spots. Most soldiers could only see straight ahead, while their peripheral vision was blocked by cheek guards. They couldn't hear orders from further down the line, making communication difficult. The Romans had found ways to communicate using horn calls, flag signals, and mounted messengers, but it was far from perfect. Once the lines were formed, the waiting began. Soldiers baked under the sun in heavy armor, immobile, waiting for the enemy to make its move. The ground trembled with the sound of enemy war drums and cavalry hooves, sending waves of tension through the ranks. Some soldiers stood still, others fidgeted or even got sick from nerves. But the centurions were always moving, maintaining discipline and ensuring that no one broke formation. The rule was simple: no one moves unless ordered to. The waiting could stretch for hours, each moment heavier than the last. When the time came, the advance began. The Romans didn't charge wildly like you see in the movies. They advanced in tight formation, step by step, maintaining a steady pace. At 15 to 30 meters from the enemy, Roman soldiers threw heavy javelins in unison, creating a deadly rain of iron-tipped spears. The javelin was more than just a weapon. It was a tool for psychological warfare. Its iron tip bent on impact, making the enemy's shields almost useless. Once the javelins were thrown, soldiers drew their gladi. Short swords built for close combat. This wasn't a clean, heroic sword fight. It was violent, chaotic, and messy. The Romans didn't waste time with fancy swordplay. It was all about shield bashing and stabbing with the gladius. Roman tactics were built on mutual support, where every soldier was responsible for protecting the man next to him. If one soldier broke rank, it could mean disaster for the whole line. They had a rotation system, where fresh fighters replaced the exhausted ones. This was probably the first form of break time during battle. Despite their training and discipline, Roman legions could still falter. If a weak point opened in the line, it could lead to a catastrophic breakdown. Once the formation collapsed, the battlefield became a treacherous obstacle course. The dead and wounded created tripping hazards, while blood turned the ground slippery. Communication was impossible as the sounds of metal clashing, men screaming, and officers shouting drowned everything out. Trying to give orders in the middle of battle was like trying to speak during a thunderstorm. Impossible. And retreat wasn't always an option. The rear ranks would block any path, and natural obstacles could trap soldiers. Mistakes were common, and soldiers sometimes attacked their own comrades, mistaking them for enemies. As the battle raged on, the real danger lay in the collapse of the formation. Fleeing soldiers were easy targets for enemy cavalry, who could ride down infantry from behind. Getting killed while running away must have been one of the most frustrating ways to die. When the battle was finally over, the silence that followed was almost as unsettling as the battle itself. The survivors were left to sort through the chaos, trying to identify their comrades among the dead. The Roman soldiers quickly scavenged valuable items from the fallen, as this was often the only way they profited from the dangerous business of war. Medics moved through the battlefield, carrying bandages, wine, and tools to treat the wounded. Identifying the Roman dead was heartbreaking, as soldiers searched for missing friends using personal items and distinctive scars. Roman soldiers were buried with some degree of respect, though enemy corpses were tossed into mass graves. The aftermath of battle also brought a unique kind of bureaucracy. Soldiers collected whatever they could from the battlefield. The dead had no need for money, and the living needed it badly. Everything, even post-battle loot, followed a strict hierarchy. Officers received the most valuable items, while ordinary soldiers took whatever was left. But it wasn't just about loot. The psychological trauma of surviving battle affected soldiers long after the fight was over. Many veterans struggled with nightmares, tremors, and violent outbursts, but Roman society didn't have a name for what we now call PTSD. Soldiers were expected to simply carry on, with little recognition for their suffering. Roman armies didn't stop marching. Within 24 hours, they were back on the move, leaving only burial details behind. The constant grind of warfare didn't allow time for grief or recovery. But eventually, after campaigns, the veterans were promised land grants or a pension. The system, though, was infamous for delays and complications, and many soldiers were left with little to show for their service. Those who survived military service often found careers in police work, as bodyguards, or even training gladiators. But the idea of retiring and living a peaceful life was a distant dream for many. Despite the brutal reality of Roman warfare, the empire continued to thrive, built on the backs of soldiers who endured unimaginable hardship. Their sacrifices were often overshadowed by official reports that glorified victories and barely acknowledged the true cost of war. Roman military life wasn't the glorious spectacle we see in movies. It was harsh, grueling, and relentless. But it was also efficient, and it built one of the most powerful empires in history.